Stephen Miller probablemente sea el miembro más moralmente repugnante de toda la administración de Donald Trump. Por eso es tan interesante, es tan divertido verlo colapsar en vivo frente a las cámaras. Eso es exactamente lo que sucedió en Fox News luego de que le cayera un bombazo legal cortesía del congresista demócrata Robert Garcia. Vamos a desmenuzar todo esto porque tiene implicaciones muy serias para los infames y posiblemente ilegales operativos del ICE, que Stephen Miller, como bien sabemos, ha ayudado a planear. Antes de que entremos en la parte legal, hay que empezar con quien ha sido una de las voces más firmes en contra de estas políticas brutales. Hablamos del gobernador Gavin Newsom. Escuchemos lo que dijo.
We're seeing unmarked cars in school parking lots, kids afraid of attending their own graduation. Trump is pulling a military dragnet all across Los Angeles, well beyond his stated intent to just go after violent and serious criminals. His agents are arresting dishwashers, gardeners, day laborers, and seamstresses. That's just weakness masquerading as strength. Donald Trump's government isn't protecting our communities, they're traumatizing our communities. And that seems to be the entire point.
Donald Trump ha sido el rostro más visible del odio en contra de los inmigrantes. Pero el cerebro detrás de todo este plan de las deportaciones masivas, sin duda alguna, es Stephen Miller. Él fue el que diseñó las políticas más crueles, desde las redadas hasta la separación de familias. La razón por la cual ahora está tan humillado es porque su plan, como bien sabemos, ha estado fracasando. No solo no ha cumplido sus objetivos, sino que cada vez es más impopular en el público. Alguien que se está asegurando de que siga siendo así es el congresista Robert Garcia. No está esperando que los demócratas recuperen la mayoría para actuar. Ahora, como presidente del comité de supervisión, ya está tomando acciones en contra de Stephen Miller. Y bueno, esto, como era de esperarse, ha provocado un ataque de rabia por parte de Stephen Miller en vivo. Antes de eso, escuchemos al congresista explicando lo que está haciendo.
First, what's happening right now is just it is so inhumane and gross. And as an immigrant myself, who came here as a young kid, it's not the America that so many immigrants come to actually be a part of, to fight for citizenship. The American dream that immigrants are actually drawn to is being ripped away from people. And the inhumanity, the essentially dehumanizing immigrants so that they're less than human, is Stephen Miller doing what he loves to do, which is be essentially the biggest piece of shit in this country. Stephen Miller should be ashamed for the way he's acting. I can't even believe he's from our state, which actually makes me more sick.
Do you plan to conduct investigations from your perch on the oversight committee of ICE and DHS? And do you think that any of these officials would actually show up at the hearings?
One is absolutely, you can take it to the bank. I mean, going after the corruption of what's happening right now at ICE and Homeland Security is going to be a critical piece of our oversight agenda. And even in the minority, we actually have some oversight investigative work coming up here in the next few weeks specific to ICE.
Great.
But certainly that is going to be a big focus of what we do. Broadly speaking, of course, when we're able to have subpoena power and actually take over the investigations, one thing I've told people is you can rest assured that if you are right now causing the level of harm that the Stephen Millers of the world are, that these ICE agents are, that the corruption that's happening to destroy our institutions, you are going to be held accountable. We're not going to forget the harm that you're causing to people and our government. We're going to use the power of subpoena investigations. We're going to ensure transparency, and these folks are going to be held accountable.
Lo que dijo Robert Garcia no solo es acertado, es algo necesario. Él lo tiene claro. Quienes rompieron la ley en esta administración tienen que rendir cuentas. Y eso claramente no le cayó para nada bien a Stephen Miller, el cual se vino abajo en una entrevista de Fox News. Miren cómo explotó cuando lo enfrentaron con la realidad de sus acciones ilegales.
It's monumental, Brett. This 6-3 ruling restores American democracy. So President Trump, over the last 5 months, had more nationwide injunctions issued against him than were issued in the 100 years of the 20th century. Most of these nationwide injunctions have come from a small handful of very hard left district court judges in just 4 or 5 cities like Los Angeles, Boston, San Francisco, Chicago. No one in America consented to be ruled by a district court judge in Chicago or Manhattan or Los Angeles or San Francisco. They elected one American president to run the executive branch. Today, the Supreme Court has said President Trump is the one in charge of the executive branch. The Department of Defense, Department of Justice, Department of Homeland Security. That is how our democracy works. Every 4 years, we go to the polls and we elect a president. We do not elect a Marxist judge in a far-left city to rule over us. And that's what the Supreme Court said today, Brett.
Y es que a veces me cuestiono, ¿no? ¿Será que este tipo no cree que hay una razón por la cual tantos jueces han bloqueado las políticas de Trump? ¿Será que no se les ocurre que romper la ley una y otra vez puede traer consecuencias legales? Pero claro, cuando estás cegado por el racismo, por el odio, como que no le entra la lógica, ¿cierto? Y sí, ya sé que esto no es algo relevante, pero amigos, ¿podemos hablar de lo mal que se ve siempre con esos trajes? Pero bueno, eso es lo de menos. Lo que sí importa es que aunque la Corte Suprema entregó algunos fallos favorables para Trump recientemente, todavía existen formas de resistir. Y eso, señores, es lo que ha dicho el congresista Jamie Raskin sobre cómo hacerle frente a estos retrocesos. Además, también, Jen Psaki ha explicado claramente cómo podemos organizarnos para poder frenar estas políticas y mantener la presión. Veamos ese fragmento.
The thing is he doesn't like the hard work the governing requires because he prefers to rule like a strongman, demanding with a version of a MAGA wand that his orders be carried out by the stroke of a pen. And at this point, he knows he can get away with it because the Republican Party surrendered its power to Donald Trump a very long time ago. And the institution of Congress, another branch of government under Republican control, has surrendered much of its power too. So the only institutional bulwark against Trump's autocratic impulses has been the third branch of government, the courts. And as Trump has pushed the limits of his power, the courts have had to check him over and over and over again, largely the lower courts, issuing nationwide injunctions to halt his executive orders as they decide what authority he actually has under the Constitution. In fact, Trump's actions have been so extreme, the courts have had to use that power to stop him more than any other president in modern history, any other president. And that's something that even Trump himself admits.
We've been hit with more nationwide injunctions than were issued in the entire 20th century together. Think of it, more than the entire 20th century, me.
Yes, you. The courts have had to stop you, Donald Trump, more than any other president. It's not the brag you think it is either, by the way. So that brings us to today, when the conservative majority on the Supreme Court decided that it too would surrender some of its power to Donald Trump. In a 6-3 decision split along ideological lines, the Supreme Court significantly curtailed the power of its own federal courts to stop a lawless president. Now, at the core of the case was one of Trump's most egregious executive orders, his decision to unilaterally end the longstanding precedent that anyone born on U.S. soil is an American citizen. Democratic attorneys general in 22 states, 2 of whom we're going to talk to shortly, sued the Trump administration, saying that order was blatantly unconstitutional. And several federal judges agreed, issuing nationwide injunctions to put that order on pause while the courts considered the case. But the question before the Supreme Court was not whether Trump's effort to end birthright citizenship was itself constitutional. They may consider that in the future. They sort of indicated they might next term. We'll see. Rather, the question before them was whether those judges should even have the power to pause Trump's order across the entire country. Well, today the court's conservative majority effectively said that those lower court judges did not have that power, that they could not pause Trump's order nationwide. They ruled that the pause would only apply to the 22 states that actually sued. It's part of creating the two Americas that we've seen repeatedly. But here's the thing. The court's decision went much further than just the issue of birthright citizenship, which is a very important one, but it went farther than that. They essentially made it much harder for courts to put a nationwide pause on any of Trump's policies. They basically said that the people challenging these orders will have to go state by state, jurisdiction by jurisdiction, to stop any of Trump's unlawful agenda. And there are a whole bunch of Trump's policies, from his federal funding freeze to his new voting restrictions to his attacks on diversity policies, that are currently being blocked by nationwide injunctions. Now, in a chilling dissent, Justice Sonia Sotomayor, writing for the 3 liberal justices, wrote, "No right is safe in the new legal regime the court creates. Today, the threat is to birthright citizenship. Tomorrow, a different administration may try to seize firearms from law-abiding citizens or prevent people of certain faiths from gathering to worship. The rule of law is not a given in this nation nor any other. It is a precept of our democracy that will endure only if those brave enough in every branch fight for its survival." In every branch, that's a key part. Today, the court abdicates its vital role in that effort. In a separate concurring dissent, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson made it crystal clear what this ruling will mean in the very near term. Here's what she had to say. "What it means to have a system of government that is bounded by law is that everyone is constrained by the law, no exceptions. And for that to actually happen, courts must have the power to order everyone, including the executive, to follow the law, full stop. To conclude otherwise is to endorse the creation of a zone of lawlessness within which the executive has the prerogative to take or leave the law as it wishes, and where individuals who would otherwise be entitled to the law's protection become subject to the executive's whims instead." As sobering as those dissents are, and they're very sobering, and there's more, the truth is that we have always known how Donald Trump thinks about power and his power. We have long known what the court's conservative majority thinks about their role in constraining him. After all, this court did grant him broad immunity from prosecution just a year ago. The big question, one of them, is what happens next? Well, this decision significantly hamstrings the federal courts. It did not entirely shut the door on their ability to block Trump's agenda. We're going to dig into that specifically. Plaintiffs can ask a court to award preliminary class-wide relief that may, for example, be statewide, region-wide, or even nationwide. In his concurring opinion, Justice Kavanaugh leaves the door open for people to bring cases as a large group or a class and get courts to issue rulings that apply to every member of that group nationwide. In other words, people can still ask the courts to block Trump's policies across the entire country if they can manage to do the hard organizing work of finding big groups of people who will be negatively impacted by them and getting them to come out. And if there's one thing we've learned in the second Trump administration, the 6 months of it that we're into here, it's that people standing up to Trump know how to do that kind of dedicated on-the-ground organizing all across the country, in every state nearly. We've seen them do it in protests everywhere. We've seen them do it in courthouses where ICE agents try to round up immigrants who are just showing up for their immigration hearings. We've seen them do it at town halls in deep red Republican districts. It is possible that we will look back on today's ruling as the day when the fight against Trump in the courts and the fight against Trump in the streets became one and the same. And I am not saying it's going to be easy. It's going to be hard. But we always knew this was going to be hard. Just got a little...
Como se los dije, existen las herramientas, existe el poder. Solo es poder resistir. Se puede interrumpir el avance de esta administración y de algún modo detener su agenda extremista. Pero para eso hay que seguir en pie, hay que seguir informándose y hay que seguir organizándose. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarme hasta el final de este video. Recuerda, como siempre, dale like, compártelo con tus amigos y suscríbete a nuestro canal Políticamente Desacuerdo. Nos vemos en el próximo video. Hasta luego.